Okay, well, just before we actually start to do this in Scratch, let's think back to our process. We've defined what we need to do, and we can assume we've done some research. We need to imagine, and what I've imagined is a healthy eating game where people are going to have to move around in a maze and choose the good food to eat. So there's my imagining. I now need to plan that out. So to plan that out, I'm going to actually use a flowchart. So I've done a very simple flowchart here to give us a bit of an idea. So at the start, we'll flash up a title and we'll give some instructions on the screen of how to play the game. The player will then move around the maze deciding what they need to eat. When they come across some food, if they've eaten food and it's unhealthy, then we will reduce the score. If they eat food that is healthy, we will increase their score. They'll keep doing that around until we check, are they at the center of the maze? Now if they're not, no, we come back and they continue moving around, or yes, they are at the center of the maze, we'll give them the score and we'll end the game. So we've now defined our problem, we did some research, we imagined our game, and we've just planned it. We've done a drawn diagram, we've labeled it, and we've given some detail. We could go into a little bit more detail of how we're going to do these things in Scratch, but for now, that basic flowchart will get us where we want. So now it's time to develop our solution, actually create and build the Scratch. And important here, we need to follow our plan. Now it's alright to change your plan, but if you do, note it back on your plan that you've made a decision that's different from your original plan, and there's plenty of reasons that you might want to do that. So let's begin by going into Scratch, and I've done some preparation on finding some resources that I need. So Scratch always starts with this cat, not what I want for my game, so I'm going to right click on the cat and I'm going to delete it, or as I like to say, I'm going to kill the cat. Our stage at the moment, our backdrop here is blank. So we need to do some importing of a new sprite, which we can do here, and we also need to put in our maze. Now I've just chosen a very simple maze which I have drawn in Paint and saved as a file. I will now open this from a file by clicking on the file here. It will ask me where I've got that, and I have placed it nicely into on the server in curriculum, and in year 5 there is a Scratch folder with some game resources. There's a background, and that's the background we're going to use. So I'm just going to import that very simple maze. We start on the outside and we want to get to the middle. Okay, so we now have our background. We can go back to our script here, but we don't have a sprite, so we're going to import a sprite also that I have made. So I'm going to import this sprite, and it is in the animated sprite. Now I have already put some code onto this sprite to make the mouth move up and down like it's chewing. So looking at that, when I click on the flag, it's going to repeat forever, and a repetition was one of the things that we needed to do, and it's going to change from one costume to the next. Costumes are in here, and you can see it will move through each of these frames to give the appearance of movement to our sprite. So that's where we're going to start. So if I now place my sprite here and click the start button, my mouth should start chomping away very nicely. Well, that's a good start, but it's not a game yet. So very important in a game is I need to be able to move my character around. So let's have a look how we would do that. Again, we're going to use the flag as our beginning event, or our start, and we want to completely repeat this over and over again, because if I don't, it'll check it once and never do it again, which means I get a millisecond to move, and then it will stop moving. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some movement by using an if-then. So here we have not iteration, but we've got some decisions being made. So if something's going to happen, we will do something. So we're going to use one of the sensing blocks, and we're going to use the arrow keys to move around. So at the moment it says if that arrow key, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so it's easier for you to see. If the space bar is pressed, well, we're not going to use the space bar, we're going to use the arrow keys. So up arrow, if we use the up arrow, we want to change the position of the Y character. So we're going to change Y by 10. Now 10's a fairly big jump, so I might change that to 5. So now when I have that running, I should be able to move up with my sprite. So let's try that. If I click the flag, if I press up, it's moving up nicely. If I press any of the other buttons, nothing's happening. So working as we expected. Now I need to use a similar thing here to go down. So instead of re-dragging all of this in, I'm just going to right click and I'm going to duplicate it. So now I need to change this to say, if I press the down arrow, I want to change Y not by 5, but this time I want to do a -5. So I'm going to move down on my Y axis. So now if I place that in there and run my code, I should be able to move down and I should be able to move up, which we can see happening. Left and right, nothing happens. So to make the left and right, obviously we're going to use a similar thing. We're going to use the left arrow, but we're going to change X. So let's do that. So we're going to use an if-then. If what? If we are pressing a particular key, in this case, if we are pressing the right arrow, we want to change X, not Y. We want to change the motion, change X, not by 10, but by 5. And it's a positive because coordinates get bigger to the right and smaller to the left. So we've got that working. Let's duplicate that. Make that a left arrow and make that a -5, and we should now have managed to, if we drop it in our forever loop, we should now be able to drive around nicely anywhere on our screen, which is looking very good. Okay, so that's great. But we need to think to ourselves, well, yeah, that worked really well, but what's the point of having lines if we don't use them? So the next thing that we need to be doing in our code is we're going to set up a collision so that if this sprite touches a black line, it's going to throw it back to the starting position or make it jump back to the starting position. So let's have a look how we do that. I'm just going to move this over here so that we've got a little bit more space. And again, we want this to happen when we click on the flag. Sorry about that. So we're going to start with that. And again, and this is a problem that most people will find, they've done a really great code, but it doesn't seem to work. Often they've forgotten to use a loop to make it keep checking over things. So we're going to be using the if-then again. So we're saying if something, and this time we want to check using our sensing if we're touching a particular color. So if this sprite is touching, in this case, blue, but that's not the color we want to use black. So we click on the color, and the next color we click on, notice as I move the mouse around, the color here changes. So we want it to be on our line, so let's click on one of our lines. So it is exactly that color. So if we are touching that color, we want to send our sprite back to this position. So in our motions, we're going to go to, and at the moment, if you look down the bottom here, we've got our X and Y coordinates. This is currently X15, Y 144, which is exactly where this is sitting, as you can see. If you look down here, if I put my mouse there, so if I place my sprite where I want it to be, it automatically puts the numbers in for me. I can type them in if I need to, but that's one less job. If I put the sprite where it needs to be, these numbers are automatically in the right position. So now if I put that in, I should have my collision working. So let's try it. So we can move left, we can move right, we can move down, we can move up, but if I run into a line, it seems to send me back every time. So that's working very nicely. I mean, I might choose not to send it back, I might just make it move back away from the line. I like the idea of jumping back to the beginning. It makes you be a little bit more careful. Okay, so we've now got 3 little pieces of script that are the beginnings of our game. At the moment it's a bit of a boring game, but it's functional. We have an animated sprite that we can move in 4 directions. We can't move through a line, but we can move around on the white spaces. So that's the end of this part of the tutorial.